Okay, everybody, this is Joseph P. Farrell. It's news and views from the Nefarium, Thursday, April 24th, 2014. I missed last week, just was exhausted after finishing the book, but maybe it's a good thing I did because this week I want to get right to the high octane speculation. Because there's been, as most of you now know, more banker suicides and suspicious deaths. And both of these articles I'm going to link for you on the website and on YouTube so that you can look at them. They're both from Zero Hedge, and I'm going to be commenting about what Zero Hedge's speculation is and what mine is. So let's go to the first banker death, and the headline here is Banker Death Epidemic Spreads to China. Listen carefully. This is obviously an English translation, I think probably from Mandarin or Cantonese, because in certain places it's a little wobbly. But nonetheless, it's a very significant story. Listen to this. Quote, until now, the terrible trail of dead bankers has been only among U.S. and European financial executives. However, as Cakeson reports, the increasing pressures on the Chinese banking system appear to have taken their first toll. Li Jinhua, director of China's Banking Regulatory Commission, died this morning due to a sudden heart attack. He was less than 49 years old. Now, folks, this story is just from yesterday, all right? So this is a recent death. Li was among the main drafters of a new caveat emptor, buyer beware, market-based rules on China's shadowy banking system, and recently said in an interview that, quote, now is not only a time to control risk, but to transform the trust industry. If it's too loose, it's a big problem. Li was found by his wife. He was less than 49 years old, and as planned, he was planning to attend a major industry conference, which would have been today, apparently. According to several sources close to the Chinese Banking Regulatory Commission, Li Jinhua was revising a talk until midnight on the day prior to being found dead. So this is very recent. I want you to tuck that in the back of your mind, the Chinese Regulatory Commission and trying to restore trust in a system, all right? Now let's go to a story from the 20th of this month, this last week, and the headline here from Zero Hedge is BNP banker, his wife and nephew murdered in Belgium. Now this is also a significant story. On Friday, news hit of another execution type murder in just as sleepy, if not so tax evasive Belgium, where in the city of Vies, a 37-year-old director at BNP Paribas Fortis was murdered alongside his wife and a 9-year-old nephew in a premeditated and orchestrated drive-by shooting. Now, folks, BNP Paribas is one of France's largest banks. It's one of the largest banks in the world. According to information from the survey and some witnesses, a car waiting outside their house near Bernot Street, near the sports hall in Vies. When the victim's car is back in the driveway, shots were fired from the car that waited patiently. In other words, the car was waiting for this banker to come out and bang, bang, bang. Like in the Liechtenstein murder, there is a possibility that the murder was the result of a previous argument with a customer. Now, with that in mind, Zero Hedge ends the article this way, quote, so just like in the Liechtenstein murder, was it truly some atrocious act by bankers that caused their clients to take justice into their own hands, or is it becoming the norm that when dealing with members of the banker class, the population, disenchanted with a legal system that is largely in the pocket of the financial system, is increasingly resorting not only to vigilante justice, but the taking of banker lives with no regard for innocent bystanders? If indeed so, this could mark a dramatic and lethal escalation in the way that bankers are treated by the broader public, not only in places where banker revulsion is palpable, but in quiet, sleepy backwaters like a small Belgian town. All right. Now, I want to say that I'm extremely skeptical of this explanation. There could be, of course, a tide of vigilante justice rising, but I don't think, even in vigilantism, that you would target not only a banker, but a 9-year-old boy and the banker's wife. The problem here is that this is happening within 3 days of the death by heart attack of Li Junhua, the Chinese banker who was a member of China's Banking Regulatory Commission, who wanted, from the article, apparently wanted to restore some trust to the system. All right, now I'm going to crawl way out on the limb of speculation here, because I think what is happening is, first of all, these bankers may be in a position. It's clear from the number of bankers that we've seen die under mysterious circumstances, many of them connected with J.P. Morgan, 2 of them taking flights off of the top of buildings, and in some cases stepping in front of trains. We had the case of Mr. Talley with the nail gun, apparently committing suicide by firing nails into his head, one of which is at the back of the skull, which again, if you see that picture, it raises the question, how would you manipulate a nail gun back there to do that? So in other words, we're dealing with people, in my opinion, that like Mr. Li Junhua, or perhaps like this banker for BNP Paribas, who are in the position to see evidence of fraud in the system. In other words, what I'm talking about here is systemic fraud, all right? And if there is that amount of fraud in the system, and we put it into the context of the bailouts that occurred in 2008, particularly in the United States, where bankers went before the Congress and said, basically, we don't want any oversight. We can't have any oversight as to what we're doing, okay? I suspect what is happening, like Secretary Fitz, is that what they're doing is they're burning all the bad paper. They're shredding all the bad paper out there, covering the trail, covering the tracks, and potentially that they're getting ready for a reset. Now, here's the problem. If that's what they're up to, the problem is most of this international financial system that I've been talking about, this hidden system of finance, depends upon the manipulation of markets via high-frequency trading, via electronic trading, and so on and so forth. In other words, the financial markets are now largely electronic. The idea of a bond itself, a paper bond, is becoming increasingly obsolete, although I think it's important still for these people to have the physical proof of their shenanigans. Now, in that respect, I think what you're looking at is the possibility that these bankers are somehow in touch with each other, that they're talking to each other. Most of these people, with the exception of Mr. Lee, are apparently middle echelon people. In a couple of cases that we've seen in these suicide, they're more senior management, but they're mostly middle echelon people who would be looking at sheets and trades and so on in their daily briefings and trying to get acquainted with what the markets are doing. They're looking at sheets, and if they're looking at sheets closely enough, they may be seeing evidences of trades being executed that are not coming from within the system, or they may be seeing evidence of trades that customers have placed orders for that are not being executed in the way that the customer has placed the order, buying or selling or what have you. Now, if that's the case, then they're also looking at evidence of a penetrated system. And I think that may be in play here, folks. I really, really do. And the reason why I can't get into at length, but the reason why dates back to the Reagan era, the Bush era, the Promise software, Inslaw scandals, and so on and so forth. All of these things, all of these managers that we've seen involved with the financial industry may be seeing evidence of a huge global system of fraud and penetration. And this is why they're being taken out. And if these people are suspicious of the way in which all of this bad paper is being shredded, or if they are raising certain types of questions about that bad paper, this would be another reason to take these people out. The thing now, in other words, that I'm getting at, that may be in play with all these banker suicides and murders, is to prevent people that may be talking to each other from talking to each other further, or it may be a case of these bankers have fallen across some information and we cannot afford to have them share it with anyone else. This is my suspicion. And this is particularly the case in the Belgian murder. I don't think this is a case of vigilante justice. And the reason why is, like I said before, vigilantism wouldn't target the man's wife or child, all right, or nephew. In this case, all three are targeted. And I suspect the reason why is that this banker may have found out something and they want to eliminate any possibility of anyone he may have talked to about it, even if it was a child that may have overheard something that they didn't want to overhear. It would have to be, in other words, a huge secret, a huge thing for them to take that kind of action, to be motivated to that extreme degree. So in other words, BNP Paribas is one of those players on the world stage, and this manager may have found something in his daily spreadsheets and so on, his reports that he's looking over as a manager in a bank of that prominence, that caused him to have some suspicion. All of this, I think, is interconnected, and we're looking at fraud, systemic fraud in the system that's being covered up, but I also suspect these bankers may be seeing a penetration in the system. These bankers may, in fact, be connected to intelligence, and the corporations are taking action to reassert their control over the financial system. So we could be looking at an all-out financial war here, and that's something I want people to bear in mind as these stories continue to come out. The Chinese situation is very, very interesting because this is the first time that we've had an indicator that if any of these high-octane speculations are true, that that system has spread somehow covertly to China. And if that's the case, they're going to want to keep that a major, major secret. And by wanting to regulate trust back into the Chinese system, Mr. Li may have been taking direct aim at some of their mechanisms for harvesting vast amounts of capital out of China. So that, again, would be sufficient reason for them to take care of this man by inducing a heart attack. And if you look at the Zero Head article, one final point, you'll see a photograph here of Mr. Li, who, you know, for a 49-year-old man, he doesn't look like he's 49, and he looks like he's in the picture of health. So it doesn't wash in my book that this was a heart attack at all. There are ways of inducing them. So watch this very carefully. We need now to concentrate on any indicators in any of these stories of systemic fraud on a global scale, of the possibility that the electronic financial markets are deeply penetrated, and we may be looking at penetration that's not even from any player that anyone knows about. And that's the other part of the speculation here. If that's the case, then that party or group may want to keep all of this hushed up. So more high-octane speculation, folks, I realize, but there has to be something tying all of these deaths of bankers and mortgage title people together, and that's the best I can come up with. Anyway, that's it for this week's news and views. God bless everybody, and I'll see you on the flip side. Bye-bye.